Imagine this. You stand in a dimly lit room, walls splattered with equations, fragments of poetry, and sketches of creatures that defy biology. A man paces in circles, his hands clawing at his hair as if trying to tear out the visions haunting him. He hasn't slept in days. His eyes, wide, feverish, glow with the kind of clarity that borders on delirium. He scribbles furiously, filling notebooks with ideas that could redefine physics, art, or philosophy, or destroy him. By dawn, he collapses. The pages he leaves behind will later be called genius. The man will be called mad. This is not a scene from a Gothic novel. It is the lived reality of history's most brilliant minds. Vincent van Gogh severed his ear in a fit of existential despair, yet painted Starry Night in the asylum. Virginia Woolf weighted her pockets with stones and walked into a river, leaving behind prose that dissected the human soul like a surgeon's scalpel. Nikola Tesla, who dreamed of electrifying the world, spent his final years whispering to pigeons in a hotel room. Here lies the paradox. The same mind capable of bending reality to its will is often one slip away from unraveling. Why does genius so often wear madness like a second skin? And why do we worship the creations of these minds while recoiling from their creators? Consider the myth of Prometheus. He stole fire from the gods to give humanity light, warmth, and progress. For his defiance, he was chained to a rock, his liver devoured daily by an eagle. This is the bargain of genius. To see further, you must burn brighter, and risk being consumed by your own flame. We tell ourselves creativity and instability are separate. We praise genius as a divine spark but pathologize madness as a flaw to be medicated away. Yet the boundary between the two is thinner than a neuron synapse. Einstein, who reimagined the cosmos, once confessed, "The exaggerated sense of self-importance people ascribe to me is painful." Nietzsche, who declared God dead and reshaped Western thought, spent his final years in silent psychosis, clutching a horse in Turin. What if the act of seeing beyond society's illusions requires a mind unshackled from its rules, even if that freedom becomes a prison? What if the visions we call madness are not distortions of reality, but hyperperceptions of truths too raw for the rest of us to bear? Walk through the psychiatric wards of history, and you'll find a gallery of fractured luminaries. John Nash, the mathematician who dueled with delusions while decoding game theory. Sylvia Plath, whose poetry crystallized despair even as she sealed her head in an oven. Kurt Gödel, the logician who proved the limits of human reason, only to starve himself fearing poisoned food. Their stories force a haunting question. Is genius a gift, or a curse disguised as one? We've built civilizations on the backs of these minds. Their equations power rockets. Their art gives voice to our collective longing. Yet we distance ourselves from their suffering, as if their brilliance somehow justifies their torment. But what if the torment is the price? What if the brain's capacity to transcend ordinary thought requires a fragility that leaves it vulnerable to collapse? A 2015 study at the Karolinska Institute found that writers, dancers, and photographers are up to 50% more likely to have bipolar disorder. Mathematicians and physicists show elevated rates of autism and schizophrenia. The genes linked to creativity overlap suspiciously with those tied to psychosis. It's as if evolution embedded a ticking device in certain minds. Create something immortal but pay with your sanity. Yet society refuses to confront this trade-off. We medicate children who daydream in class, pathologizing the same neural restlessness that might later invent a new art form. We demand well-adjusted geniuses, minds bold enough to disrupt the status quo but docile enough to conform to it. A contradiction as old as Icarus. So let us ask plainly, what if we've misunderstood madness entirely? What if the hallucinations of a schizophrenic, the mania of a bipolar artist, or the obsessive rituals of a tortured inventor are not mere defects, but the mind's desperate attempt to communicate, to bypass the filters that keep most of us sane and mediocre? This is not romanticization. It is a plea to stare into the abyss Nietzsche warned us about, to ask why the brain's most extraordinary capacities coexist with its gravest vulnerabilities, to wonder if our definitions of sanity are merely a pact among the unimaginative to exile those who see too much. By the time you finish this sentence, 6 people worldwide will have taken their own lives. Among them, perhaps, a mind that could have cracked fusion energy or penned the next Hamlet. But we'll never know, because we still treat genius and madness as separate realms. One to celebrate, the other to silence. The man in that dim room is still pacing. His name doesn't matter. He is Van Gogh, he is Turing, he is the quiet student sketching galaxies in the margins of her notebook. He is you, on the days when your thoughts feel too vast to contain. What happens next? Whether his ideas ignite a revolution or his mind devours itself, depends on forces we've barely begun to understand. Forces buried in the labyrinth of the human psyche, where creativity and chaos dance a waltz only the bravest dare to join. To follow him into that labyrinth, we must first confront a truth as unsettling as it is undeniable. Genius is not a superpower. It is a tightrope walk over an abyss. You are born into a world that demands two incompatible things: to think like everyone else and to dream like no one else. This is the first fracture. From childhood, the mind is sculpted by rules: social, moral, logical. You learn to color inside lines, to solve equations with predetermined answers, to equate success with obedience. But what of the child who sees faces in clouds, hears music in silence, or asks why the sky doesn't shatter? Society labels them distracted, eccentric, or troubled. Yet these are the minds that might one day rewrite the rules. Here lies the hidden war. The human brain is wired for both survival and transcendence, and these impulses are at eternal odds. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of the psyche we exile to stay socially acceptable. For most, the shadow lurks quietly, a reservoir of repressed desires. But for the genius, it becomes a feral collaborator. Jung warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The visionary's mind doesn't just visit the shadow, it mines it for truths too volatile for daylight. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche's Dissect. His philosophy, raw, unflinching, emerged from years of self-imposed isolation and migraines so severe he vomited for days. He wrote, "Thus spoke Zarathustra in a frenzy," later confessing, "One must have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But chaos, once invited in, doesn't leave." Nietzsche's brilliance arose from his willingness to stare into the void, until the void stared back. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this duality. He saw existence as a pendulum between unbearable boredom and unendurable pain. For the genius, this swing amplifies. The mind that perceives sublime beauty in a mathematical proof also feels the universe's indifference like a physical wound. Schopenhauer's will to create becomes a double-edged sword. The drive that births masterpieces also gnaws at the creator's peace. Modern neuroscience confirms this. The dopamine pathways that fuel creative obsession overlap with those implicated in schizophrenia. The temporal lobe, responsible for metaphor and insight, is also where epileptic auras conjure religious visions. A study at Stanford found that writers and physicists exhibit heightened connectivity between brain regions that typically remain segregated, allowing them to link disparate ideas, but also flooding them with sensory overload. The price of seeing connections others miss is losing the ability to shut them out. Society, meanwhile, plays a sinister game. It glorifies the products of genius, the paintings, the theories, the inventions, while pathologizing the process. Van Gogh's sunflowers hang in museums, but the man who painted them was deemed a lunatic. We use Turing's algorithms daily, yet hounded him to suicide for his sexuality. This cognitive dissonance stems from an ancient fear. The visionary terrifies because they prove the world is malleable. Jean-Paul Sartre saw this in humanity's bad faith, our tendency to cling to roles and routines to avoid the terrifying freedom of existential choice. The genius rejects this. They choose to live raw, unfiltered, which society interprets as rebellion or madness. As Sartre wrote, hell is other people, not because they're cruel, but because their gaze forces us to confront our own contradictions. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World warned of a society that anesthetizes discomfort with pleasure and conformity. Today, his prophecy manifests in subtler ways. Algorithms feed us curated realities, numbing the existential itch that drives innovation. Those who resist, who chase uncomfortable truths, are pushed to the fringe. Pharmaceutical ads pathologize sadness, anxiety, and even intense focus. A child prescribed Ritalin for daydreaming today might have written Leaves of Grass tomorrow. But the problem runs deeper than psychiatry. It's philosophical. Viktor Frankl, Auschwitz survivor and founder of logotherapy, argued that meaning is humanity's primary drive. Yet society offers prefabricated meanings, careers, status, consumerism, that leave the deepest minds starved. The genius hungers for purpose beyond the mundane, a quest that often leads to isolation. As Frankl noted, what is to give light must endure burning. Why does this matter? Because the same cultural forces that stigmatize madness also sterilize genius. Schools reward compliance over curiosity. Corporations prioritize efficiency over experimentation. Even the self-help industry peddles mindfulness as a tool for productivity, not transcendence. We've created an ecosystem where originality is celebrated in theory but punished in practice. Nietzsche saw this coming. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe, he wrote. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high for the privilege of owning yourself. Yet how many can pay that price? How many minds crack under the weight of their own awareness? The answer lies in a neurological tightrope. The default mode network, DMN, the brain's idling state, is hyperactive in both creatives and those with depression. It's where mind-wandering, self-reflection, and existential questioning arise. But the DMN is also a hall of mirrors. For the genius, it becomes a lab for radical ideas. For the unstable, a prison of recursive thoughts. The difference between breakthrough and breakdown? Sometimes just a neurotransmitter's whim. This isn't metaphor. A 2022 study in Nature revealed that LSD and psilocybin, substances known to induce mystical and psychotic states, temporarily disable the DMN, mimicking the brain patterns of meditating monks and schizophrenics. The genius's mind, it seems, naturally exists in this liminal space, teetering between revelation and ruin. So we arrive at the heart of the problem. Society is built for the average, but progress depends on the abnormal. The genius is the ultimate outlier, a statistical error that propels humanity forward. Yet our institutions, educational, medical, economic, are designed to homogenize, to eliminate errors. We medicate the bipolar artist's mania, not realizing it's the engine of their creativity. We force the autistic programmer to improve their social skills, diluting the focus that makes them revolutionary. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called this the flow state, when challenge and skill align, creating transcendent focus. But flow has a shadow, obsession. The genius doesn't balance, they burn. And society, fearing the flame, either exploits it or extinguishes it. The man in the dim room knows this. His hands tremble not from fatigue, but from the voltage of ideas coursing through him. He is Schrödinger's cat, alive with potential, dead in the eyes of a world that cannot fathom his existence. But this is not fate. It is a collision of biology, philosophy, and societal betrayal, a trinity of forces that turn brilliance into a battleground. To understand how, we must trace the scars left by this war, and why so many minds become casualties of their own gifts. You wake in a world where every streetlight hums with data, every screen flickers with someone else's dream. You scroll, click, consume, but feel emptier with each swipe. This is no accident. It is the fallout of a war waged against the very minds that could have saved us. The consequences of severing genius from madness are not abstract. They are etched into the hollowed-out eyes of the college dropout coding in a basement, the novelist drinking alone at dawn, the physicist who no longer answers emails. They are the silent collapse of what could have been. Consider the Turing paradox. Alan Turing cracked the Enigma code, shortening World War II by years, saving millions. Yet Britain convicted him for homosexuality, chemically castrated him, and watched him bite into a cyanide-laced apple. Society consumed his genius, then spat out the man. His death was not just a tragedy, it was a warning. We still haven't learned. Today the same pattern repeats in subtler forms. A tech founder builds an AI that predicts disease outbreaks, then burns out and disappears into a meditation retreat. A musician's album captures a generation's angst, but she cancels her tour, citing exhaustion. We call it self-care. They know it's surrender. Neurologically, the toll is measurable. The creative brain's hyperconnectivity, the trait that allows metaphor, innovation, and cross-disciplinary leaps, also corrodes the boundaries between self and world. Synesthetes taste colors. Inventors hear machines whisper. But when the brain's filters fail, the world becomes a cacophony. A Cambridge study found that 72% of breakthrough scientists report episodes of derealization, moments where reality itself feels like a poorly rendered simulation. This isn't poetic suffering. It's biology. The default mode network, DMN, active during self-reflection and imagination, is a hive of activity in both creatives and those with depression. For the genius, the DMN isn't a rest state, it's a war room. And when the battles rage too long, the mind begins to cannibalize itself. Culturally, the consequences are darker. By pathologizing the traits that fuel genius, we've created a hierarchy of acceptable madness. We romanticize Hemingway's alcoholism because it produced literature, but jail the homeless man muttering Shakespeare on the subway. We diagnose children with ADHD for daydreaming, yet profit from apps designed to hijack attention spans. The message is clear. Your mind is only valuable if it monetizes its divergence. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World envisioned a dystopia pacified by pleasure. We've achieved it, not with Soma but with TikTok and Adderall. A generation of potential visionaries now orbits between distraction and sedation, their brains too fragmented to sustain the focus required for transcendence. The result? A cultural flatline. Where are today's wolves? Are Einsteins? They're drafting tweets, not treatises. Economically, the cost is incalculable. A 2023 study estimated that workplace conformity, stifling creativity to meet KPIs, cost the global economy $1.2 trillion annually in lost innovation. But the true loss is deeper. For every Nash-like mind medicated into submission, humanity misses a fractal leap in mathematics. For every Kafka forced into an insurance office, we lose a universe of fiction. The Dunning-Kruger effect explains why. Those least capable of genius are most confident in their mediocre ideas, while the truly brilliant drown in doubt. Society rewards the former, silences the latter. The Italian astronomer Galileo recanted his heliocentric views under threat of torture. Today he'd be fired from academia for toxic productivity or lack of collegiality. Psychologically, the genius pays a tax no one else sees. The same dopamine surges that fuel all-night coding binges or obsessive canvas revisions also strand the mind in addictive loops. A composer hears a symphony in their head, but it plays on repeat, drowning out their child's laughter. The flow state becomes a riptide. Viktor Frankl's search for meaning hits a wall here. The genius seeks purpose in creation, but when society reduces their work to content, metrics, or hot takes, the void returns. Nietzsche's warning, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," curdles into a taunt. Why create when creation is neutered into clicks? The most insidious consequence? The normalization of self-betrayal. Children start as innate geniuses. 90% score as creative prodigies at age 5. By 25, that drops to 2%. Schools teach them to color inside lines. Corporations demand they think inside spreadsheets. The synaptic pruning of adolescence isn't just biological, it's cultural. We're lobotomizing potential at scale. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the lie we live when we deny our freedom to become. But what happens when an entire generation is trained to fear their own brilliance? You get a world where the top song of 2023 was generated by AI, where algorithms write novels, where students use ChatGPT to avoid the terror of a blank page. The machines haven't surpassed us. We've diminished ourselves to meet them. The man from the dim room is now 35. His hair's gone gray, his eyes still blaze. He works at a tech startup, optimizing ads for toothpaste. At night, he sketches equations in a leather-bound notebook he hides from his wife. Last week he Googled burnout symptoms. The algorithm suggested yoga, a keto diet, and a mindfulness app. He doesn't need serenity. He needs someone to tell him his madness means something. That his insomnia is not a disorder but a dormant superpower. That the world's relentless pressure to be well is the real sickness. But no one does. The consequences are not coming. They're here. In the therapist's office where a girl is diagnosed with maladaptive daydreaming instead of given a canvas. In the pharmaceutical ads that reframe curiosity as restlessness, insight as rumination. In the quiet death of ideas that could have rewritten the future. We stand at the edge of Huxley's nightmare, where the masses are pacified and the visionaries are pacified hardest of all. The tightrope has become a noose. And yet, there's a way to cut it down. You are standing at the edge of a cliff. Below you, the ocean of conformity roars, demanding you dissolve into its depths. Behind you, the asylum of your mind, a labyrinth of lightning-struck ideas and doors that open only to madness. For years, you've been told these are your only choices, drown or retreat. But there is a third path. You step sideways. This is the rebellion. Not a roar, but a quiet refusal to play by rules written for smaller minds. History's greatest visionaries did not overcome their madness. They alchemized it. Consider the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage." Rilke didn't cure his existential despair. He let it carve him into a vessel for the Duino elegies. Van Gogh didn't silence the storms in his mind. He let them swirl into starry nights. The rebellion begins when you stop seeing your chaos as a flaw and start recognizing it as unrefined fuel. Rule 1. Stop seeking balance. Seek integration. Carl Jung's shadow work wasn't about taming the darkness. It was about dancing with it. Jungian analyst Marion Woodman taught that the psyche's wildness, when integrated, becomes its superpower. A modern example? Comedian and storyteller Hannah Gadsby, who transformed their autism and trauma into Nanette, a seismic shift in comedy that redefined the art form. They didn't dilute their intensity, they weaponized it. Nietzsche's Amor Fati, Love of Fate, offers the next clue. Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do. For the genius, this means rejecting society's pity for your condition. Your hypersensitivity isn't a disorder, it's a radar for truths others evade. Your obsessions aren't distractions, they're portals. When mathematician John Nash was asked how he coexisted with his schizophrenia, he replied, "I've made a kind of compact with my hallucinations. I listen, but I do not obey." Rule 2. Turn your demons into consultants, not dictators. The rebellion demands new rituals. David Bowie, a chameleon of identity, structured his chaos with discipline. He adhered to strict work hours, channeling his mercurial energy into albums that redefined music. He didn't suppress his fragmentation, he orchestrated it. Similarly, novelist Haruki Murakami rises at 4 a.m. to write, leveraging the hypnagogic clarity between sleep and wakefulness, a state neuroscientists link to creative insight. These rituals aren't cages. They're trellises for wild vines. But what of the societal walls? Here the rebellion grows thornier. You must become a double agent, fluent in the language of the normal world, but loyal to your inner code. Temple Grandin, an autistic scientist, revolutionized livestock design by reframing her sensory sensitivities as tools. The world needs all kinds of minds, she insists. Yet to be heard, she first learned to translate her visual thinking into words the neurotypical could grasp. Rule 3. Infiltrate then detonate. This is the art of strategic subversion. Poet Audre Lorde weaponized her rage against racism and homophobia into verses that scorched complacency. She didn't plead for a seat at the table. She built her own damn table and set it on fire. The most radical act? Redefine sanity. In 1973, psychologist David Rosenhan published On Being Sane in Insane Places, proving that psychiatric labels are often prisons of perception. Today, the Mad Pride movement reclaims madness as cultural identity, not pathology. They echo Foucault's assertion that mental illness is a social construct used to police dissent. Your task isn't to fit into the world's Procrustean bed. It's to expand the world's imagination, as physicist Richard Feynman did when he dismissed philosophy as low-level baloney, then reinvented quantum electrodynamics through playful irreverence. Practical weapons for your rebellion. The Obsidian Journal. Write unfiltered at 3 a.m. when defenses are down. Let the shadows speak. Burn the pages if you must, but first mine them. The Bipolar Sprint. Channel manic phases into creative bursts, then rest without guilt. Surgeon and writer Sherwin Nuland drafted The Art of Aging during hypomanic streaks, then hibernated. The Pervert's Library. Consumed forbidden knowledge. Schopenhauer read Buddhist texts. Jung devoured alchemical manuscripts. Let irrelevant ideas cross-pollinate. The Unseen Alliance. Find fellow travelers. The Inklings, Tolkien, Lewis, met in pubs to critique each other's myths. Your tribe isn't on LinkedIn, it's in the margins. But beware, the world will retaliate. When Zora Neale Hurston wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God, critics dismissed her as provincial. She died penniless, her genius unrecognized until decades later. The rebellion requires a faith that outlasts rejection. As Kafka wrote, a book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. Expect resistance. Your axe will terrify before it liberates. The man from the dim room closes his laptop. He opens the leather notebook, fingers smudged with ink older than his regrets. Tonight he doesn't Google symptoms. He writes a letter to his 15-year-old self, the boy who built telescopes from PVC pipes and cried at the indifference of stars. They will call you broken. They are wrong. You are a broken mirror, and the world needs your shards to see itself. He mails the letter to no one. It doesn't matter. The act itself is a spark. You are not a person. You are a threshold, a doorway between what humanity is and what it could become. This is the truth the ancients feared, the reason they chained Prometheus and laughed at Socrates. Genius is not a trait, it is a function. A sacred friction between the mind's hunger and the universe's indifference. Madness is not its enemy but its dialect. The final revelation is this: what we call genius and madness are the same force seen through different lenses. One cultural, the other clinical. One sanctified, the other shackled. But the fire is identical. Nietzsche glimpsed this when he wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. The stars he referenced, the works of art, philosophies, and scientific leaps that redefine reality, are born in the supernova of a mind pushed beyond its limits. The same cosmic violence that births light also annihilates. Van Gogh's Starry Night is not a painting. It is a suicide note and a love letter fused into one. The swirling heavens, the cypress tree reaching like a dark flame, these are not mere brushstrokes. They are the visual scream of a man whose mind could not contain its own luminosity. We frame his canvases in museums but bury the lesson. To create the extraordinary, you must first become it. The DSM-5, Psychiatry's Bible, lists 297 mental disorders. Not one entry acknowledges that a symptom might be the psyche's attempt to evolve. When a schizophrenic hears voices, we medicate them. When Joan of Arc heard voices, she led armies. When Nikola Tesla saw visions of alternating current machinery, he called it inspiration, not hallucination. The difference lies not in the mind's wiring, but in the world's willingness to listen. Carl Jung warned of this collective blindness. The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. The genius does not solve problems. They transcend them, dragging society kicking and screaming into a new paradigm. But transcendence demands a mind unmoored from the old world, and to the old world that looks like madness. Here lies the ultimate betrayal. Society needs genius to survive, but fears it enough to destroy. We are a species hoisted on the petard of our own contradictions. We laud Einstein's theory of relativity but exiled him as a lone wolf in Princeton. We celebrate Turing's code breaking but broke him for loving the wrong body. We tweet Frida Kahlo's quotes about pain while ignoring her final diary entry. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." The pattern is clear. Humanity crucifies its saviors, then worships their corpses. But there is a way to step outside this cycle. The secret is to realize that genius and madness are not states of being, but acts of becoming. They are verbs masquerading as nouns. When Kafka wrote, "A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us," he revealed the truth. The ice is not your mind, it's the world. The axe is not destruction, it's awakening. Every time a child is told to stop daydreaming, a potential universe dies. Every time a hallucination is dismissed as unreal, a metaphor flatlines. The Mesopotamians understood this. Their word for poet, Nehru, also meant to shine, to illuminate. To them, creativity was a form of divine madness, a sacred possession by the gods. We've secularized the ecstasy out of existence. The ultimate truth is not a revelation, but a reclamation. You are not sick. You are not cursed. You are an evolutionary gambit, nature's wild bet that a mind stretched between brilliance and breakdown might stumble upon a new way forward. The voices, the visions, the crushing weight of infinity, these are not defects. They are the raw materials of revolution. Neuroscience now proves what mystics knew. During transcendent experiences, whether from meditation, psychedelics, or psychosis, the brain's sense of self dissolves. The default mode network quiets. You become a vessel. The medieval alchemists called this solve et coagula. Dissolve the old, coagulate the new. Your madness is the dissolution. Your genius is the coagulation. So what must you do? Burn the script. Stop asking, "How do I fix myself?" and start demanding, "What is my chaos trying to build?" When Virginia Woolf filled her pockets with stones, she wasn't surrendering. She was testing the weight of the world against her own. When Nietzsche embraced the horse in Turin, he wasn't broken. He was speaking the only honest language left. Your mind is not a problem to be solved. It is a question the universe is asking itself. The man from the dim room stands at the cliff's edge again. This time he doesn't see an abyss. He sees the primordial sea from which life first crawled, a broth of infinite potential. The tightrope was an illusion. There is no fall, only transformation. He steps. And as he falls, he realizes, this is how flying begins.